Welcome to CPP.chat, the most visual podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. Before we continue, I'd like my fellow host, John, to read this week's disclaimer.
Thank you, Phil. A large part of this episode features comments from makers of power tools that can seriously harm you. In fact, if you read the product manuals, you may never plug one in and use it because they warn you on every page that it can, at the least, cut off a body part and at the worst, kill you. This is the section where we are going to tell you the same thing. Power tools are dangerous, and there is a risk every time you plug one in. If you follow any of the advice, tutorials, or inspiration contained in this episode and are injured, we cannot be held responsible or, most importantly, legally liable. Thank you, everyone. So we have two first-time guests on this week. Anna Kozakova is Product Marketing Manager for all things C++ at JetBrains. So, Anastasia, what are all the C++ projects at JetBrains?
So currently it's free tools, Cline, ReSharper C++ and AppCode. So Cline is a standalone tool, ReSharper as an extension to Visual Studio, and AppCode for iOS developers.
Okay, so you covered iOS, Visual Studio separately, and then there's a general standalone, anybody can use it for Cline.
Yeah, it's targeted on cross-platform projects. So if you do something cross-platform, that's a good choice for you. If you're like more about Windows environment, then just install ReSharper on top of Visual Studio. Or if you do some like iOS or macOS projects and you would like to some like complementary thing to your Xcode, then AppCode is a good tool for you.
Okay, so thank you. Also is Dmitry Kozhevnikov. I should have practiced that first. I apologize, Dmitry. So Dmitry is a software engineer at JetBrains. Wait a minute. Phil is developer advocate at JetBrains. Anastasia is product marketing manager at JetBrains. Dmitry is also at JetBrains. Dmitry, are you guys ganging up on me?
Well, yes, I think you're locked in here with us for now. Yeah, so I work on Cline, and I'm doing some C++ specific stuff in Cline, like the language support and so on. And I'm also responsible for having too much work at once.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
John, are you looking for a new job? We have a couple of offers at JetBrains.
Oh, really? Well, mention them on the podcast. There might be somebody interested.
We actually have a couple for C++ developers, so everyone is welcome. Yeah, we have an open offer for C++ developer to ReSharper C++, and we're open to quality engineers for C++ tooling. So just ping us. We have lots of goodies, including cookies.
Yeah. Presume they'd be located in St. Petersburg or Munich. Is that right?
Yeah, mostly St. Petersburg and Munich. We can consider remote as well, but that it depends on you.
It has to be the right person, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you guys just had a release. Was it this? Today's Monday. Last week. You just had a release last week?
Yeah, I remember some release party last week, so probably that was it.
If you remember the party, it wasn't good enough.
The party was good enough, so probably there was a release before that.
So what was the release about?
Yeah, so we actually released Cline 18.2. That's the second major release this year. And actually, that's a big answer to a big question, like when, for example, the Clank IDE is coming to Cline. It is there. So thank you, Dmitry, for doing that. And so actually, that's the person behind that. So we have Clank IDE language engine that is a complementary language engine to our main one. And we have more project models. So we have Gradle C++.
What is Clank IDE? Tell me what this is.
Clank IDE is actually language protocol for Clank. So if nowadays many people are doing their IDEs on top of Clank, and of course we try that. Of course we have to try that. We are maintaining two different language engines in ReSharper C++ and in Cline. There are two different solutions. And after some time, we came to a point when we understand that we have to try something else. We have to check if something else is possible. So we, of course, tried Clank. We tried it with Clank IDE. Dmitry can provide more technical details for everyone on this. And so it works. right now it works only for showing the errors and warnings in the editor, but we hope to do more on top of Clunk IDE. It will require more efforts and investigation for sure, so I can promise like that we'll like move to it completely right now. It's in the experimental mode right now, so like a completely fresh language engine. So it's turned off right now on Windows because of some memory issues, but it's on Linux and macOS, and we've already got, I could say, a few good feedback on this from our like early users. So yeah, Dmitry probably can tell more on the technical side.
Right. So I know that this is a question that came up a lot when C-Line was first came out, is why aren't you guys using Clang? And I think it's what, as engineers, we would immediately say, well, here's this open source engine that's tracking the standard very closely. Why would you use that? But your answer was actually kind of an interesting one, which is that, you know, Clang's job is to generate code, but an IDE is a separate task. An IDE has to understand code even that will not compile. You have to figure out.
True. That's
how
true.
do you,
like, we did a big job in this release. I mean, like, we didn't just took Clank IDE as it is and put it to C-Line. That doesn't work. And so that's what we were talking about that. So there are also some like historical reasons, because we have a platform which actually expects some kind of a parser from us, and the Clank doesn't fit in its like regular state. So we have to tune it. So we tried, like that was kind of experiment. We were not sure if we managed to do that for this release, but we actually managed to do so. So we have to tune it. So we have to implement a lot of things on top. We will contribute some of them back to Clank probably. So it's just in process. It's currently some kind of an experimental solution. So just give us some time to polish everything. But I guess at least for showing the errors and warnings, it works for us. We'll see if we could implement more on top of the Clank architecture. So we still can't say that it's perfect for everything the IDE actually is doing, because it has lots of goodies like refactorings that requires some knowledge about the whole project, and the Clank is like not about it right now. But it's interesting, like piece of good architecture and interesting piece of compiler that probably could work for IDEs. And we are, of course, experimenting without it, so we can stay apart from it because everyone is trying it. So if we stay apart from it, that means we are somewhere behind. It's good for supporting new features because it doesn't require any job from us. But we'll see if it works for the IDE purpose, because indeed, Clank is more about compiling this stuff. It's a little different in terms of the IDE. It's like deal with the unfinished code or uncompiled code, as you said.
well, maybe this question is for Dmitry. Are you actually taking LLVM and create some kind of output from LLVM that works for what C-Line expects? Is that how you're doing it?
No, it's actually not quite that, because with Clank and with the way IDEs work with Clank, it's all about the AST and not about the lower LLVM layers, like not about LLVM IR or something like that. So,
oh, I see.
So we are managing the Clank AST in memory and and something on the disk. And yeah, so right now we are using the existing code that is in Clank IDE, and we have to patch it here and there to fit our needs.
Is that what Clang lib is? Is a way of querying the AST?
Like libclank is a kind of all C API to Clank AST, and the good thing about it is very stable, and you can like link with user code with it, but it's not our top priority. And since we control both sides, it's more natural for us to use the underlying C++ API for Clank AST. So we're using that. It's a lot less stable. It's a lot, in a sense, it is evolving, and we have to merge it like very often. But like we think it's the future to use the C++ API. Yeah, and.
Yeah, I can't imagine trying to create an IDE, and you guys are always trying to add new stuff to the IDE, making the refactorings, all these kinds of stuff, and also tracking the language. because tracking the language is just, the standards committee is doing everything they can to make your job as hard as possible.
Yeah, like, I remember Louis Dion, who was amazed when at my talk at ACCU, I tell the audience that we're actually maintaining our own language engine. And he said, like, wow, really? How could you? Yeah, so that's a tricky thing.
And obviously, that's a really big job. And it's taken a few years just to get to sort of the point where even C++11 is really satisfactorily covered. But now we're there. Tracking newer language features is more incremental. So that should, I think, track a bit more readily.
Yeah, so one of the ultimate goals of this all Clank stuff is to allow us to do some cool end user features and not race against the committee for the new features. But actually, we will see if it pays off or not, because right now you can do most of the things with a single file you have opened in the editor with Clank. It's more or less solved problem. It's just manpower and a quality of implementation to support it properly. But for the whole project, like for things like find usages and code modifications across several translation units and so on, it's actually not so clear right now if it's possible to achieve what we are wanting and what we are aiming for or not. I hope it's possible, but we need to experiment with it a bit more.
Well, yeah, it's a mind-boggling challenge. But I do remember the same situation with Clang, very, very impatiently waiting for Clang to be able to actually be a useful C++ tool. I was a Mac developer, so I understood that Clang was coming along and you could use C with it, but it's so hard to get from C to C++. But then once they got there and started to support, they kind of went directly to C++11 because that's just about what its time frame was. And so there really wasn't very much time when it didn't support 11 and was a full C++ compiler. It kind of, that's about when it became useful. And since then it has tracked. So I understand what Phil's saying. It's so hard to get there, but once you get there, it's not impossible to track the changes. It's just hard for me to keep track of them all.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to push the team as well, because here in JetBrains we're kind of keen on implementing parsers on our own, and when we're saying to the people like we're taking like Clank as a parser, they're like, oh, you can't do anything on it, just throw it away, we can do better. And so just to really make a proof of concept, to push people to do that, to push people to implement a better engine on top of Clank, it's kind of a tricky job, but seems like we're getting there.
And of course, we had Timur on last week also from the C-Line team. It's not a conspiracy, I promise you, but he told the story about how he actually raised a defect report back to the standard on C++17 because of what he saw from the implementation side. So it's working both ways now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I know that I know the committee relies heavily on implementers, maybe more on implementers than they do on end users, which is a little sad in a sense. But the implementers see the problems early on because they have to see every corner of the language as they're implementing. Users don't quite get to the corners until they play with it a little bit. Well, some users find those quick. I'm sure Louis is pushing the corners of just about everything pretty quickly. But most users, we don't run into those kinds of issues right away. But the implementers, of course, have to think about, well, what is this case? What do we do when this happens this way? And I think that's what Timur was talking about last week. Is he's considering all these cases, and the code has to do something, and it's not always clear what the right thing is. And I think sometimes the committee knows the answer, but in some cases, the committee itself just hadn't thought about, well, what is that case? Give the committee a lot of credit for thinking about a lot of cases, but nobody's going to catch them all. And so it's not a perfect process.
Was that C++ or Pokemon?
There's a couple of things that we didn't talk about in our news that we should have. One of them is entirely me playing hooky, because I am supposed to be right now. I'm supposed to be working on the schedule for CQB Con, and in fact, the schedule is done. I have the schedule. Please don't send me email saying when am I scheduled. What I haven't got it pushed out to sked.com yet, and that's not an impossible task, but it takes a little bit of time. And so I'm very much hoping that we will have an announcement. I hope within 24 hours. That's a little optimistic, but I'm very close. We just need to get the schedule up, and it's going to be an exciting schedule this year. There's a lot of really interesting and really good stuff on it. Going to be really proud to get it up, but it's not up yet. The other thing that has happened, and this has just kind of happened very quickly, there is a GoFundMe that has been started by the Include C++ group. They're trying to raise money so that they can give tickets to an organization called, does it say what the name of that is? A Women in Tech Fund. So the Women in Tech Fund is set up to allow tickets to be distributed to women who would like to go to a conference and otherwise can't. And so they're raising money so that CPP Con tickets can go to Women in Tech, so that Women in Tech can distribute these to women. And they have now raised close to $3,000. They have $2,700 that they have raised, and that's going to be, well, it's their goal was $1,250, and $1,250 would have been 5 tickets. So they have more than doubled their goal. So I think the plan is not to just buy more tickets, but to actually try to help with some travel expenses and such as that. But if we can put the link in the show notes for people who are interested in donating, at this point, I'm not sure how your money would be spent, because as I said, I don't think they're going to try to get more tickets. I think what they're going to try to do is help with lodging and travel costs and things like that. But that's up to the C++, Include C++ organization, what they're going to do. But anyway, I was very excited about that because I don't think they even officially announced this yet, and they've already exceeded their goal. I think they were planning to officially announce it on Tuesday, but word leaked out, and they had so many donors that that they've exceeded their goal. But I'm very excited about that.
And that was just in what, 2 days, was it?
Yeah, something like that. I think that I know the GoFundMe was just started this weekend. I think it may have just been started either yesterday or late Saturday. And yeah, and so it's just, I'm just really feel all good all over about the kind of support that we've shown there. I mean, we as a community have shown, and so that's great. That's really great.
So while we're doing news,
I'm sorry, what?
I was going to say, while we're doing news, we usually do the roundup of conferences.
Yeah.
That's obviously CPP Con tickets, I presume, are still open. There's our Pacific++, Meeting C++. C++ on C, tickets should be going live quite soon. I'm in the process of getting that set up at the moment. And the call for speakers closes tomorrow in BST, British Summertime, end of the day. So if you are looking to want to speak at C++ on C, your last chance, if you're watching this live, if you listen to the podcast, you're probably too late. But speak to me anyway. And also ADC, Audio Developers Conference, we talked about last week. I believe tickets are selling for that as well.
Okay. And then we also have one other piece of information which we don't normally have because we're more organized than we normally are. Not to say that we're normally disorganized, but we actually have the upcoming show, and it's going to be this Thursday. That's 8 p.m. UTC, and in my time in California, I guess that's 1 p.m. 1 p.m. on Thursday, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And it's going to be, we're calling it the Security Show. We're going to have Eva Conti, Matthew Butler, and Troy Hunt talking about security. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to learn a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Troy is actually very well known, but outside of our normal communities. So I think it'll be bringing a bit of his own following as well. So it'll be interesting to see.
It will be. Great, great, great. All right. So that's what we have coming up. And we're going to tease them about the show after that. We may even have a show lined up after that. But I guess
we've actually got the next one locked in as well. It's going to be next week on the, did we say the 8th?
Such foresight.
Maybe we'll leave it to the next show to announce who's going to be on that.
Okay.
So we don't give too much away at once.
That's right. All right. Can we talk about, Anastasia, what can you tell us about the future of C-Line? What should, or ReSharper, or, I'm sorry, what is it called?
AppCode.
Right. So what's coming down the pike here? What can we see?
Yeah, I'll tell you, but before that, I will jump with a little teasing, with a little ad. Actually, it's live now, so I'm allowed to tell that for the next 50 hours, all our tools are 50% off, the whole JetBrains toolbox for personal use. So all the tools, including C-Line, ReSharper, C++, AppCode, or if you would like to get all products pack that covers all desktop tools, 50% off for 50 hours. So, and that's for the Friendship Day special offer. So just everything isn't like announced on the website, so you can just like pause the Cpp.chat for a while, go and buy your license, and then come back. And before, like while you're doing that, I will talk about the future of our tools for a while. So let's start with this.
Friendship Day?
Sorry?
What is Friendship Day? Is that what you said? Friendship
Day? It's actually today. Yeah,
I've never heard of Friendship Day.
30 of July, so Friendship Day. So just don't mind. We just found a good reason for the promo. Yeah, so all you have to remember is that it's 50% off for 50 hours. So quite a short period of time for you to grab like a discounted license. Yeah, so talking about the tools, C-Line. So actually, we talked about the language engines. So that's one of our major direction for the future. Another one is the project models. We were stuck with CMake for quite a long time. So CMake is great, but we know that there are many projects that are not on CMake. So we started working on decoupling CMake from C-Line. We actually released like Rust plugin for C-Line is released with cargo support from, I guess, it was in March. So it is already supported. But for C++, for a long time, we were tied into CMake only. You can open the folder or like a single file in C-Line, but you will get a limited code inside. So starting with this release, we added Gradle for C++, only the new plugins format, but still, and also the compilation database format, which is actually great because you can generate it from many known project models, or you can even like generate it from your custom project model just with the tools like Bear, just that listens to your compiler calls and just generates all the necessary information. There are still some limitations, like you can't run your code or compile it because the compilation database, despite of its names, it actually lacks this information about compiling and linking the whole project. It only actually gets the information about the compiling in a single file. But still, you can open the project from the compilation database right now, and the full code inside, all the refactorings, all the code analysis will be available. And that's one of the major direction for the future for C-Line. So we're going to have the public API so that like everyone could actually implement their plugin for their own like project model in C-Line. And we can get a help of community for implementing the plugins for project models that are still not available in C-Line. So that's the major thing now, and we hope to proceed with it. And the third point for C-Line is remote development. So that's where we're going. We were planning to, like, our plan was to announce something in 18.2. The task is in project, but it's not yet there. So we postponed it to 18.3 probably. And I hope we'll get some remote development features available in like next version of C-Line. So that's talking about our plans for C-Line. ReSharper C++. Yeah.
What are remote development features? What does that mean?
So that means that, like, guess you have an IDE on your machine, local machine, but you have your code on a remote machine, or you have your code on a local machine, but you build and run on your remote machine. That's actually a typical configuration, I guess, for for many people. So right now you can only sync to a local machine and build and run everything locally, but there could be cases probably you don't want to build your whole project on your local machine, or probably you don't have the full environment on your local machine and you have to get something from a remote machine. And so to deal with such cases, Cline can't do anything right now, but we hope it will in the nearest future. So the first case will be just to have your sources locally and to build and run on remote machine, I guess. So, but we're gonna cover more remote cases in the future, and I hope that will be a winning strategy for Cline. Right now, I guess NetBeans is doing quite a good job in terms of remote development features. They have a lot of things in this area. I'm not sure everyone like else in the area can do some great stuff as good as NetBeans is doing for remote. But we hope to do a good job, and we hope to cover all the cases in Cline. So yeah, we actually did a proof of concept. We added the VSL support. If you've heard about it, it's Windows subsystem for Linux, which we work from Cline through the SSH. So it doesn't work for it for the Windows API, but for the SSH. That means we just did the proof of concept, just removing, dealing with the file system from that task for a while. So it worked. We released that. And so on top of that, we're building our remote solution, like working through the SSH, dealing with the file system differences, and all this like synchronization stuff, which is kind of complicated, but a very interesting task. So yeah, we hope to do that, and we hope to have it. My hope as a PMM for 18.3, but like, who knows? Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to try to hold you to that, but I'm fascinated by this. This was the situation that I had when I was working at Amazon, which is that I was doing all my editing on the local machine using a text editor. I couldn't really use an IDE because my files were not local files.
Exactly.
I would SSH in because the editor I used supported SSH very nicely, and so that all worked very well. But it was just a text editor. It was not an IDE. It didn't know anything about C++. Well, actually, it does know a little bit about C++. It certainly didn't understand C++. And it would have been so nice if I could have had something like this when I was there. That's very exciting to me.
Yeah, that's actually great. You can do many things right now manually in Cline. I mean, you can copy the files, you can go to your remote machine from the built-in terminal, compile there, just then do some remote GDB server debug, which is available for a while in Cline. But still, it's not the whole solution, which just works for you when you have a remote project. That's our main to deal with remote projects as a whole solution, just trying to help you with many tasks, which you can actually do manually and all this connection stuff, but you'd better don't.
No. If the tool understands those things, that's just so much better. So I cut you off, and I got hung up on this remote thing. You were going to tell us about, I think you were moving on then to what you've been doing for ReSharper. Is that where?
Yeah, so talking about other tools. So AppCode shortly actually just gets the same C++ support at Cline, so it's not many things to talk here about. So right now our job is to make AppCode work with Clunk IDE, which is not yet available in the AppCode. So AppCode will be released without the Clunk IDE support for C++ right now, but we hope to do that. Maybe in the next release, we'll see how it goes. We're not sure right now about the technical solution. And ReSharper C++, it actually evolves a lot. And I guess this release, so 18.2 will be coming somewhere in the end of August. So it's not yet released. But the major feature is already there in the Early Access program, which is the support for C++ CLI, which is a bridge between C# world and C++ world. So if you have a project which actually joins two, you're probably using the CLI. And the CLI was not supported for quite a long time in ReSharper, and it's a top voted request, and we finally get it there. So still with some limitations. Phil actually presented a nice blog post in ReSharper C++ blog, so you can actually go through it and you can see what are the limitations. And we're really looking for users' feedback. So if you are working with this kind of a mixed project, just try the ReSharper C++ CLI support, see how it works, how all the smartness works for you, and report the feedback back to us, because currently we are kind of lacking it, and it's better, to get the feedback before the release from the public early access preview build than after the release. So yeah, that's kind of a major direction for C# C++. The guys also implemented lots of nice additions for C++ 17, so like small fixes here and there for some modern C++ features, and we're gonna proceed with that. And so I guess that's it for C#.
Phil, I'm not a Windows guy. Tell me what the heck this CLI stuff is.
So we got the C# running on .NET on Windows, and of course other platforms now, but thinking about Windows in particular. .NET is what we call a CLI language, common language. I forget what the I stands for now. But to interoperate between C# and C++, there was this. There's actually originally a language called Managed C++ invented. That was a really horrible hybrid between the two. And yeah, it just about worked. I had to work with that. But no one would use that for their main language. It's just an interop language. That was replaced by C++ CLI. I believe it was actually a Herb Sutter project to do that. It was one of the things he did when he first went to took over the C++ group at Microsoft. So it's a big improvement on Managed C++, but it's still not really a language that most people would reach for as a first language. A lot of compromises in it and a lot of weird lifetime issues and things, but it makes a good job of bridging the managed garbage collected world of C# and the world of C++ that we know.
So if you had a team
Sutter behind that, you'd expect that to work out quite well. Sorry, you were going to say.
Well, I was just going to say, so it was a solution for a situation where you had a team of C++ people and a team of C# people, both of which had useful libraries that you needed to make work together. So that's what you did. Yeah,
or if you just have C++ people, but they want to call C# libraries from a third party, or sometimes it's the same people that they're writing both sides. They're just doing the C++ bits for performance purposes, for example. It's what we did a lot of when I was working at the banks. That's where I did a lot of my C++ CLI. Now, in the blog post that Anastasia mentioned, I did actually say at one point, as a rule, no one uses C++ CLI as a primary language. So, of course, on the Reddit thread, a couple of people popped up and said, "No, we do." So it does happen, and there are some advantages to it as a language, but it is a little bit weird.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, if you take a C++ and you look at it and you think, C++ doesn't have enough value categories, and so that's how C++ CLI is born.
Yeah, but there's even more ways to shoot yourself in the foot.
Okay. The whole arsenal idea.
Enough rope to shoot your leg off.
That's right. Okay. That's an important philosophical question, right? How much rope does it take to shoot your leg off?
And the answer is C++ CLI.
So one of the questions that I should ask, and I don't know who of you to ask this of. I know that you Phil have been doing some committee work. How active is JetBrains on the committee? Are you the people in plural, or what's going on? Is it just monitoring from the outside? Are you actively pushing papers, or what's going
on? I think Timur, who's on last week, is the most active member of the committee. He was on the committee before he joined JetBrains, as he discussed last week. Right. And he's now continuing in the capacity of representing JetBrains. I went to my first meeting in Rapperswil, mostly as an observer, so we'll see how that continues. So at the moment, it's just the two of us, but possibility that others will go to some meetings. I don't know if we have specific plans yet.
Well, there's now a group specifically on tooling, right?
That's right. At the moment, that's not really going in a direction that's as applicable to us as we would have liked, but it's certainly within the overall remit of that group, yes.
Is that because it's focusing more on packages than on language things like refactoring?
Yeah, for now. Yeah. For now it is, but the original mission statement was a bit broader. So I think there's still a chance that we'll sort of come back round to something more relevant to us in the future. And I suppose to some extent it's up to us to drive that.
Yeah, and actually, I think I'm planning to go to San Diego and also to observe mostly the tooling group, because I have a lot of ideas how to do things better, or like just ideas why things are not so good now in the C++ tooling, but I'm not sure how to fit it in the committee work, because yeah. So my plan is to go to observe and to chat with people, and then maybe to start some more active work.
I think the committee itself is figuring out what it can do, because this is not what the committee normally does, right? It's not language. It's packaging, it's tooling, it's outside the language. And so I think that if you have ideas, I think they're interested in that. They're trying to figure this out themselves.
Yeah, I think we talked with Herb about this like tooling working group in the committee when it just started, and so he actually invited us to join. I mean, JetBrains to join this working group, and that was just exactly the time when Timo joined us. So we were like happily saying that like, yeah, Timo is joining, and now like Phil is also in, and I hope Dmitry will join later. So. Actually, for us, the main goal is just to take care that the features that are adapted to the language, and here I talk mostly about the work on the language itself, not about the libraries. The features that are adapted to the language are, like as Herb said, toolable, like because otherwise it's crucial for us to get them into the tool. And I guess in that case, it's kind of difficult for the community to adopt the features if they are not toolable. And so we see our goal as just taking care of that as much as we can, just to make sure that we can do that, not only just in C-Line or in ReSharper or in general. So that's not about our, like, we have our interest for sure, but like, it's more important for us to understand that we could support this kind of new features in the tooling, in the IDEs. Otherwise, people are staying apart from that because, you know, due to various surveys, people are still using C++ 11 and 14. They're not using C++ 17, and here's the big question: why? Probably we're not adopting the features to the community better. So how could we do that? Maybe we can help from the tools point. I mean, like make better support, like Cline modernize is pushing people to the new tool, but maybe we can push them inside their IDEs they are a big fan of. So, and here I'm talking about the all C++ IDEs on the market. But for that, we need to be sure that the features are toolable, because if it takes us, I mean, like 10 years to support a feature in a proper way, it doesn't mean that the feature is toolable at all. Like, so that's how we see our goal, and that's what we hope for the tooling evolution group and the committee. You're right that right now it doesn't seem it works in that way. It's more about the package managers, which are also important. Like, Carnin is doing a great job there, and hopefully they can like discuss more in this direction, and Microsoft with their package manager as well. But for us, this working group is mostly about talking about the toolability of the new features to take care about that. So that's the goal.
Well, that can certainly be a blind spot. If someone is working in the committee, it's not obvious to them necessarily what does it mean to be toolable? You know what I'm saying? And so they can have an interesting idea about a language approach and not realize the implications of that. I think we normally think of that at least I think about this from a teachability point of view, where people say, well, we've got this, you know, new language thing, and I look at that and say, and how are you going to explain that to people? Because if you're not an expert, it doesn't make any sense at all. It does when you are an expert and you say, oh, well, it's because we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this. But to just explain that to someone without going at that level of detail makes it really hard. And so that's a teachability thing.
Yeah, exactly. We are trying to do that. Actually, I was trying to do that for 2 years in a row in my CQB Con talks. I was exactly trying to explain what toolability means for us, like talking about the view on the language from the tooling point of view, how we'll look at the language. Because it seems that this is different from what the usual C++, regular C++ developers see in the language. And seems that it works, seems that people start to understand why it works that way, what happens actually in the tool when they, I don't know, press the button. So, and they understand why it goes that way or not another way. And so hopefully we can do this job even better.
Timur just DM'd me to point out I missed a part of your original question, John, where you were asking if we're actively pushing papers in the committee meetings, and you wanted to make sure that we know, yes, we are. In fact, Timur's been working on a few of them himself. So just to address that part, it's not just the toolability aspects.
I think there is another important area where we can improve as a community. Like we need to make sure that our playing field is not so fragmented as it is now. Like it's more unified, because it's very important to the tools. Because, like, for example, for now, a lot of the IDE should talk to the compiler to find out some things, and the build system should talk to the compiler to find out maybe the same things. And there are different compilers, and usually like to find out whether the size of void is 4 or 8 in this specific compiler with this specific set of flags, and things like that. And because it's so complicated, it's very complicated to support new compilers or new build systems because they can't talk to each other unified enough. So that's why IDEs don't work mostly for C++ in some corner cases, because in corner cases there are specific compilers and specific build systems. And I think the most important thing is to make the flow projects and files and stuff related to C++ building and running more unified and more accessible to tooling. Yeah. I can provide some more examples later, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you for catching that, Phil. I don't want to overlook what's going on as far as the contributions that you're making. I was just asking kind of where the company's going, where JetBrains is going with this, and it's great to see that that Timur is doing papers. I am constantly impressed at the level of effort that's required to just stay up. I mean, just looking at all the papers that are published every year, or I shouldn't say every year, every meeting, meetings. It's just daunting to think that anybody is able to keep up with that at all.
I agree.
Yeah, as recently joined the committee, agree.
Yeah, right. I have kind of recently. I've attended some meetings, but I was always just an observer, and I'm now starting to get some of the mails because of my role with the C++ Alliance. The C++ Alliance is now also a member of the committee and joining. So I'm starting to see these things and seeing some of the stuff that I never saw before, even as an observer. And it's just kind of overwhelming what's going on. But I have, I'm hoping to be able to attend some more meetings and to be able to be a little bit more involved in that as well. And am a little daunted by the possibilities, but I hope to see you in San Diego, Dmitry.
Yeah, as a nice side effect, we now have a regular blog posts about the trip reports from the committee from Timur, and the Phil has joined. So, yeah.
And it's not just us as well, because Timur was just pointing out to me again, as well as the toolability aspects. Some of the proposals that are coming from our side are about simplifying the language, and you pointed out one, P1008, about simplified rules for aggregate initialization. Actually came from one of the ReSharper C++ guys, and Timur helped him to write it up. So yeah, there's all the teams are behind this.
kind of unfortunate thing is these kind of proposals that simplify things or make features more toolable actually don't make features more toolable, because we are not the existing code that uses the features the old way not going anywhere, and we can just pretend it doesn't exist. And yeah, and it would exist like for the next 20 years or something. Even if people stop writing the old style, the code will still has to be parsed and analyzed. So these papers about new features or simplified features are kind of nice, but it's not about tooling, I think.
Unless it's a simplification of something that's not actually gone into the standard yet, or has recently gone in, like Tima's example from last week with the structured bindings.
Right, where he's pointing out that you can make the rules simpler by just maybe other cases in the language where we're doing something similar, just make it consistent with that. That is something that is a win both for the tooling implementer, but also for the user, really. And certainly a win for people who are trying to understand what the language is doing. If you can just say, well, you already know the rules, that's what the standard does with, say, type deduction, where it says, well, here's how auto works. It's exactly the same as it works for function templates, except, the whole we don't deduce initializer list. But other than that, the rules are exactly the same. And explaining it that way is, I think, a benefit for the toolers, because they say, well, it looks like we can probably use the same code. But it's also much easier for humans to understand when you just say, yeah, it works the same way.
Yeah, my point is that you can't use the same code. You can use the same code for the new cases and the old code for the old cases, and it's kind of painful for tooling, because you have to support both ways if you really want to make a reliable tool or reliable like source-to-source transformation, because the old ugly cases are not going anywhere from users' code bases. So it's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, that's true. We have a lot of baggage. There's a lot of history and a lot of lines of code. And, when I'm in training, I often try to get people to think about what's the dollar value of the C++ code that your company has, and then realize your company is just one small drop in a huge ocean of people with C++. And that's why, because students don't always understand. They say, well, why don't we just, change the rules? So this other stuff is, if it was a bad way of writing code, why don't we just say you can't do it that way? And, well, you're breaking, trillions of dollars worth of value would just evaporate if you did that. This is valuable code that people are relying on. It may not be as pretty as we'd like, but people rely on it, and it's valuable. And if the committee ignores that, that's, as I say, it would destroy a lot of value that we don't want to do. And so that's why all that stuff still has to work. And as Dmitry's pointing out, that means all those tools, as shiny and new as they are, they have to work with this crusty old code, because that code is still valuable. As much as you don't like it, you don't want to look at it, but it still has to work, and it still has to work reliably, and it still has to work the way we've always expected it to. Subtle changes in meaning would destroy code, because we're programmers and we take things, it's like, okay, what exactly does this mean? How can I take this right to the edge of what the interpretation of that is? And if we come along later and say, well, here's this other way of looking at it, the rules are slightly different, you're breaking code. So the opportunity for this is only when it's still new, which is, I think, the example that Timur was giving when he's talking about, wasn't his example on structured bindings?
Yeah, that's right. It was about the accessibility.
Yeah.
I think it was written as it must be public, when really what it should have been was accessible.
Yes, right. So, and also that's kind of a removal of an unnecessary restriction. So that means there's no existing code that's doing the wrong thing, because it wouldn't have compiled.
Yeah.
Right? So we're allowing, that's always nice. But, and it is one of the things that the committee does sometimes do. I mean, if you look at one of the questions I have when I introduce lambdas and talk about not having to declare the return type of a lambda, if it follows the form of return expression. And I sometimes have students ask, well, why does it have to be so restricted? Why can't the compiler just, it's like, well, okay, that's the next slide in C++14. That's the way it is. But I'm glad the committee did it that way, because it's hard to undo. It's hard to go the other way. It's hard to say, oh, there were some cases we didn't consider, and so that's a problem, right? So I don't mind at all the committee being a little bit conservative and saying, we're going to leave some things that are not legal right now that could be theoretically legal. We'll figure out if they should be legal later. I'm okay with it. I'm okay when the committee is a little conservative. That's a win in the long run.
You made the point earlier, which I don't think anyone disagreed with, that we have a lot of baggage that we can't do too much about. But I think the real secret is not creating too much new baggage. If we can minimize that, then we're winning.
Yeah.
Our team, again, has also pointed out that there are some times that we do break existing code, but really only if we think that code that did compile before was already broken because of that.
Yeah.
So it does happen sometimes.
Well, when I think about breaking existing code, we do make the statement that we don't, but in practice, it's virtually impossible to not. And I think about this when I think about our experience at Amazon, where we had code that the writers of the code had essentially said, using namespace std and using namespace boost, and then they used shared pointer, because at the time shared pointer was only in boost, and you try to compile that under C++11 and suddenly it breaks. And that's the kind of things like, how could you prevent that from breaking? And then as you think about it, it's almost impossible to make any change at all to the language that isn't going to break something. If someone has done something like that, it was a surprise to me, because like, well, this code isn't that bad. Why would that not run under 11? And it's like I said, oh, it's because we accepted something from boost. It's now, and we didn't rename it, which would have been a terrible idea. I think taking the name the same is great, but it created all this ambiguity in all this code, because the compiler doesn't know, well, which shared pointer do you want to use? And you know, from the author's point of view of the code, they really don't care. But the compiler says you have to pick. That's the kind of thing where, yeah, we break code all the time without, you know, and that's not necessarily even awful code. It's just, I don't know how the committee could have tried to prevent that from happening. Except as they said, trying to rename everything that gets imported in the language, into the libraries, which is not a good idea. I wouldn't recommend it.
That's what namespaces are for.
Right. Well, you know, arguably, that's one of the things that I try to do in my code is I don't use namespace, using namespace, even in my implementation file. Of course, we've told people don't do that in a header, because you're poisoning your, you know, polluting your global namespace when you do that sort of thing. But we've always kind of said, well, you can do it in an implementation file. And I shy away from doing it even in an implementation file. And that makes your code a little more resilient. But we haven't really told people not to do that. At least I haven't seen people who get on that bandwagon. I do it personally, but I don't. I kind of tell people, oh, it's your implementation file. You can do what you want in there. Just the headers, you can't do that. And but at Amazon, when we tried to port over all this code to C++11, that was the single biggest issue we had to deal with. Fortunately, not that hard to fix. Yeah. But that's not the goal, is to say, oh, it's not that hard to go back and change your, you know, 10 million lines of code that you're trying to port over. That's not really the goal. The goal is you don't have to do anything at all, and it just magically works. That's the goal, and that's a hard goal. It's a hard goal to bring it forward.
I've seen a similar workaround in some open source project that wanted to use a stat shared pointer, but on platforms where it's not available, it in some header called common.h, it opens the namespace stat, and then there is using boost shared pointer, and it closes it, and it pretends that you have a shared pointer inside it. So these kind of things are also not so great for tooling. Yeah.
I don't mind so much when it breaks at compile time. It's when it breaks at runtime, particularly in very subtle ways. I actually did come across a problem like that when moving from boost mutex, or one of the locks, to the standard version, and something that was spelt the same way had different semantics that weren't obvious on the first run even. So you got some subtle threading issues just by changing which implementation you were using. That was quite tricky to unpick.
Yeah, this is I think one of the things that Boost library authors are faced with. If their library is standardized and the standard makes any changes to it in the process of standardizing, saying, well, this is the way we think it should work, then the author has to figure out, well, do I want to accept that change just to be compatible with the standard, even if the author says, well, you've kind of removed one of my features. There's certain features in Boost, in the originals, if you look in the originals, there's certain features that go away because the standard committee had said, well, don't need that feature. So you take that out. Well, then the Boost author's in a situation where, what do I do there? But that's not our problem. That's the Boost author's problem. But it does come from the fact that that the committee is making a library of something and using the same names. And so it's you can see that users, as you said, Phil, can get in a situation where you say, well, it's mutex, right? It should be the same thing and should have the same semantics. And ideally it should, but may not. What a depressing thought to end on. We are kind of running out of time, and I have to go. I have not only do I have a schedule to work on, I have a schedule to keep because I have to meet somebody.
Well, I'm glad to see that the JetBrains network has held up during the promotion. We did have a little bit of dropout.
Yeah, last time we did it in 2011, I guess everything just failed. Like, we had a huge drop of the network and everything. So looks like now everything is working, so you still can get the promotion and the discounted license. So,
but as soon as the show finishes, everyone should go and hit the servers.
Yeah, what I was going to say is this is only going to help for people who are listening live, right? Because I don't think we can get the podcast out within 50 hours, can we?
It's possible. Now I'm clearing down the backlog, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Do my best.
All right. Well, I do want to ask anybody if there's something we want to say before we wish everybody a safe coding. Obviously, we've got the promotion at JetBrains. All the different products. Everything is on sale.
I think I have a minor thing to tell.
Yeah.
Like these problems that we've just discussed about, like name shadowing and so on, these shouldn't happen in modern languages with modern tuning, but these are happening in C++. So if some of you encountered such a problem and you see a problem and you think that it shouldn't happen, there should be a way to prevent it. You can, for example, tweet to us, so we are aware of it, and we can think about how we can mitigate it from the side of the tooling cost, from the side of IDE. These like study cases about problems are very important to us, and we are not getting them often enough, like from users' feedback. We're getting bugs much more often.
How would you tweet that? Just #CLine?
Cline IDE, so that's actually me behind that. Or you can just ping me in Twitter, like Anastasia K2512. So I think many people in the community just knows how to reach to us on Twitter. So you can do there. You can use the tracker. You can use the support email. Any channel will finally come to the development team. So we're very close to every input from our users. So just find any way and just ping us. You can even ping the general JetBrains Twitter. It will redirect to C-Line teams. So that's maybe the easiest way for those who don't know how to get to us.
And you can also reach your friendly developer advocate.
Yes, you can ping Phil, meet him.
Phil_Nash on Twitter. Phil squared most other places.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be at CPP Con. So actually, all of us here will be at CPP Con this year. So we'll be glad to chat with all our users or those who can provide some feedback. We're always open to any kind of feedback. So just come to us and show us your issues, your problems, your ideas. We'll be happy to write them down.
Yeah, you're expanding your exhibitor. We haven't really talked about that, but your exhibitor profile is going to be expanded this year, right? Instead of doing 2 days, we'll be doing 3 days, right?
Yeah.
So very excited about that. I'm still working on, and we've teased it on this show before, something called Tool Time, where we're going to have opportunity for attendees to talk to not just tool vendors, but anybody who's an expert in some tooling area, and get not formal talks, but instead kind of one-on-one help. And that's what we haven't worked out all the details on that, but that's on my list after getting the schedule out. So, Bill, are we ready to wish everyone safe coding?
Yeah, safe coding. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks very much. Appreciate everybody coming at the time, which is a little different for us. So, to everyone, safe coding.
Safe coding.
Safe coding, bye.
Safe coding.